Good morning. Thanks for being here. Welcome to this session, which is focused on STEM education here at Pitzer College. My name is Omoto. I am the Vice President for Academic Affairs and the Dean of Faculty here at Pitzer College. So I oversee all of our academic programming, work with faculty and students on our curricular issues, majors, and so on. And I'm excited to see all of you here today, certainly. And I hope you'll be getting during the day a good sampling of Pitzer, full range from student activism to academic programming and our lovely setting here in Southern California in the LA area. I appreciate you all coming today to be here, and I especially appreciate our panelists. I have 4 faculty members here to talk with you about their experiences working with students, their research, and STEM education or related science education here at Pitzer. The game plan for today, then, we have just an hour together, is that I will ask the panelists to introduce themselves and a little bit about what they teach. And then I have some questions, some more general interest questions about Pitzer and academic classes and program at Pitzer, and then some questions more about their own research projects and for all of the ways in which they engage students on those research projects. It is one of our hallmarks of our educational experience here for all of our students to get immersive, intensive experiences, we're kind of regardless of major, but then especially in the sciences that our students do work on generation of new knowledge and research with our faculty. So I want them to have a chance to tell you about that. I will also tell you at the outset, I'm going to pass around, I only have a few of these, but it's a QR code, because one of the exciting things that's happening at Pitzer right now, which you may see as you walk around campus, is we're building a new science building. And you can actually see it now for our campus. It's just down here in the southeast corner of the campus. We have an existing science building, and it is about double the size now, a new structure going up that will join that science building. And it's part of our investment in science, but also it is in parallel having with the change in our science program from going to being shared across 3 colleges, Claremont Mechanic College, Scripps College, and Pitzer, to just 2 colleges, Pitzer and Scripps. So the time that you are here as a student, you will see the new building open and the transition from our program from being 3 college to 2 college, Pitzer Scripps. And I know that some of the faculty here from the science area can speak to some of the ways that they're thinking about the programming going forward in a Pitzer Scripps way for that science program. So I will pass on the QR code. A few of us want to take a shot of that, and you can look at some of the things that are happening in the building. We also have a webcam that will tell you continuously what's happening as the building is being erected. So I'll pass this around, but I will start again with welcoming here and asking the panelists who stood on the line here to briefly introduce themselves to all of you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Gautam. I'm Agarwal, and I'm a faculty at Keck in neuroscience, computational neuroscience, so at the intersection of computers and brains. And we're at a time where both of those fields are really influencing each other.
Hi, I'm Budischak. I'm a biology professor. I study the ecology and evolution of infectious diseases. So some of the research in my field is like, where did COVID-19 come from? So what kind of animals did it come from? So I study questions, not on COVID, but on other infectious diseases in wildlife and how they're relevant for human health.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tessa Solomon-Lane. I'm also a professor of neuroscience over at Keck, and my area of research is in hormones, brains, and behavior. And in particular, in my lab, we study the development of behavior. So everyone in this room has a personality, and you grew up into it, and so we want to know how that happens. And we do that in a fish model system.
Good morning. I'm Darin Brown. I'm a faculty in the psychology department, but I'm trained as a cognitive neuroscientist and also a computational neuroscientist. And my research looks at reward signals in the brain and how they're affected by emotion and how we can use these models to predict disease states like depression or substance use disorder or Parkinson's disease.
Great, thank you. I also want to say that I'm hoping that we will have some time at the end for questions from all of you. So as you go along, you think about things that you want to make sure to ask, jot those down, and we'll get to those in the last 10 minutes or so today. So, and I'll start then with a broad question for each of you to address, and that is to say a little bit about Pitzer classroom, what that's like, I think in terms of not only the size, but also the dynamics of that classroom. And if you also want to say a little bit about specifically maybe the science, some of the science offerings and science labs as well, that would be great. We'll start with Darin. How about that? We'll go the opposite way.
Yes. So I teach courses in a few different fields, in psychology, obviously, but I also teach courses in neuroscience, and I'm also one of the faculty members of our brand new data science minor. So I teach courses in computer science and data science as well. My classrooms vary quite a bit depending on what type of course I'm teaching, obviously. So I have introductory courses like Introduction to Psychology or Introduction to Data Science, and those tend to be larger classrooms. We could say 30, maybe 40 people. I also teach courses with practicum components, so lab courses like stats or other lab types of courses, and those have fewer people, smaller classrooms. And then I teach really intensive seminar courses, which have very few, well not very few, but much smaller courses, students. And so we have a lot of discussions in those classrooms and lots and lots and lots of readings of scientific articles and things like that. Stick with lab work, or we can just talk about classes. I can talk about my research lab. So I have a lab on campus where we study brain signals, electrical brain signals. So I have an EEG system in my lab, and I employ, I have like 10 students now in my lab working for me. And the lab is called the Reward, Affect, and Decision Making Lab, or the RAD lab, because names matter. And we do all sorts of different types of experiments in our lab. We're currently, hopefully, very soon, going to start looking at actual patient participants, so bring some Parkinson's disease patients into our lab so we can look at their brains and all the fun stuff that comes with looking at brains.
Awesome. So a lot of the classes I teach, if they're lecture only, they tend to be in the 24 to 26 range, sometimes a little bit bigger, sometimes a little bit smaller. Lab classes are typically around 18 students, and we occupy different spaces on campus. So often the lecture will take place in a classroom that sort of enough room for 25 people to sort of sit comfortably and move around, but we do a lot of I do a lot of having the students drag the seats around so they can work in small groups or stand up and sort of draw on the various whiteboards or blackboards in the classroom. So there's a lot of movement in addition to lecture. And then for the lab, we have great wet lab spaces, and they're going to be even more once our new building opens. And y'all are going to have 3 years there if you decide to come, which is just going to be fantastic. For me, some of our wet labs really just means a lab where you're doing science. I also literally have a wet lab because, like I said, we have fish, and so some of the time we're in there as well. And we do all sorts of things depending on the classes. So I teach classes like Foundations of Neuroscience, all the way up to a majors lab in neuroendocrinology, so thinking about hormones, behavior, and brain. And we teach GE classes as well, so science classes for non-STEM majors, because folks who are not in the sciences also still want to learn about the sciences. And so we really try to have science represented across the curriculum for folks who are doing all sorts of things. Got a lot of questions in that list. I don't know what else to include. I'll leave it there for now.
Hi. So I teach introductory biology, which is a class with like 40 students in it, but we really do a lot of active learning in the class, working in groups with partners, trying to figure stuff out, answer questions, figure out the material during class. I teach upper division biology classes that are much smaller, about 18 with a lab. My disease ecology and evolution class, we do mostly computer-based labs where you learn how to do epidemiological modeling. But we also do some cool field sampling projects too. Our intro bio labs are really great. We have students actually throughout the semester learn how to design scientific questions and collect data and analyze it, and then we're in the middle of the period right now where they have, every single group has figured out their own project and are collecting this data and do amazing things with it right now. Oh yes, our intro biolabs and minor division class, one of the great resources we have here on campus is right across the street. There is a field station. So during these labs, we can walk across the street and be in this unique patch of like very rare native coastal sage scrub habitat, where students have the chance to do projects there. Also students in my research lab, I study some of the birds out there, so twice a year we go out there for a couple weeks and catch and release birds to look at their infections and collaborate with another professor who studies their behavior. There's a lot of collaboration among professors. And one last class that I'm really excited about, I'll be co-teaching for the first time, is we're starting a new class in public health. So I'm working with several faculty from across the 5 Cs to offer a class in Introduction to Public Health. That's going to be taught at the Hive, which is this really cool teaching space way across campus, but it's worth the walk because they have really interactive classroom spaces. They come with everything in the room is movable, from the whiteboards to the chairs to the trolleys that have all sorts of art supplies. They have button making, they have painting, they have a wood shop, they have like textile rooms. It's a really cool maker space that is also a place where you can teach classes.
I'll just insert too. Way across campus here means still walkable.
Yeah.
It's like 10 minutes.
I think one thing I would add to all of these really amazing examples is I think perhaps many of you are at a time where you're trying to compare your options. So I'll take a more comparative approach to my answer. So before this, I was at Berkeley, also in California, and I was there as a student, a TA, and a teacher. And one thing that I find, I think every environment has its strengths and weaknesses. One thing that I find really unique and powerful about the STEM experience on our campus is teachers and students are very aware of pedagogy and the importance of the exchange of knowledge in the classroom in a way that's very different from research-centered campuses. And so I've been here 2 years, and in that time I've learned a lot about what allows a student to grow from when encountering the complex nature of knowledge that usually accompanies STEM. And that the term scaffolding is one that I hadn't experienced before coming here. The idea of creating digestible chunks of knowledge that are put into a larger context. So many of the activities that professors very intentionally engage in, I'm starting to learn, and one of those is discussion-based and reading-based classes. So if I teach, let's say in my computational neuroscience class, the idea of how models learn patterns from the world, it really helps to have different examples from different types of reading, some technical, some more in terms of social impact, and wrestling with ideas with discussion as the center of it, because each person approaches the ideas from a very different perspective. And so another part of that, as many of my colleagues alluded to, is the idea of giving students agency in the knowledge creation process. And part of that is project development. So being a scientist, coming up with a proposal from the infinite sea of possibilities, how do you whittle down to one idea? How do you develop it? How do you probe knowledge? And now, how do you evaluate AI as a provider of knowledge in this context? So I teach both at the upper level and at an intro level, we learn how neural networks work in 3 weeks, so building from the ground up, using visual tools where you don't have to program, but you can click and drag aspects of the neural network to see how it models data. That's just one example, and I'm very happy to stay afterwards to talk about more.
Right, thank you. I think we will then keep drilling down a little bit since you talked about not just the classroom, but about research, and maybe if you could mention a little bit about a recent project that you have and the ways that students have been involved in that, sort of what are opportunities for students coming to Pitzer College to be involved in knowledge generation and research, and sort of Sarah this time. Okay.
Sure. So I have a research lab on campus here. There's about 10 students currently doing research in my lab. Often they stay for multiple years, start with small projects and build to bigger senior thesis projects. I have 2 big research projects going on right now. One where we're looking at one of those infectious diseases that can spill over to humans, and we actually study it in a field system over in Finland. So I have 2 students going with me to do research in Finland for the summer. I also have a great project here on campus where we utilize the field system, we catch birds, and I'm really interested in how migration affects disease risk. So I have students, they can start by just volunteering. If you're willing to get up at 6 a.m. and come out, you will get to learn about the science we're doing, get to handle the birds, and if you're interested in the project, you can contact me and start working in my lab to start looking at the parasites they have and how to analyze data and how to ask questions with it. So I have lots of opportunities, and working with students in my research lab is one of my favorite parts of this job, and I think it's a really unique experience at a liberal arts college because you get to work directly with the faculty members, not just with grad students, which is what predominates at bigger universities.
Yeah, I can go next. I also have a lab that's sort of between 6 and 10 people typically. And we have a lot of projects going on, and usually they're overlapping. So when students express interest, meet with me. Some folks are from classes, so they've met me there. Some folks have just seen my website or heard about me, so they'll get in touch. And there are lots of different skills and different kinds of projects that students can get involved in. I'll describe one just because I think it sort of exemplifies the best of liberal arts research. This was a project that we started during the pandemic with a colleague of mine who was teaching a bioinformatics class. So thinking about genes and their expression. And basically I went in, talked to this class for about 10 minutes about fish and social hierarchies and dominance and subordinates. They knew nothing about this. They went off into their groups, helped design a project. We picked the best one. Because this was the pandemic, I actually did the physical part myself, but in normal times, or relatively normal times, the students are involved in every part of it. And then we got back brain transcriptomic data within a few weeks so that those students in class could actually be analyzing real brain data, which brain genes are being expressed more highly or are being suppressed by a particular social context that they had asked the fish be in because of their research question. So the students in this class were able to do this research in this semester. We then sort of transferred the project back to my lab. I had some senior thesis students take that forward. And then the professor and I, so we're still working on that project. It should be written up next year for publication. We presented it at a bunch of conferences, the students too. And then the idea is to bring it back to the class. So build a follow-up study based on what we've learned and bring it back to the class and start this cycle again. And so for me, it just shows the potential here for not just doing research in the lab, but really having this interplay between lab and class, because we really are doing real science, both in the lab and in the classroom. And one of my favorite parts about research is students can come in and not actually know what they want to do. They can just want to try it. Some students come in and they try it and they're like, this is great and it's not for me. Fantastic. Some students try it and they're like, I'm not sure this is for me. And after trying it, they're like, you can get a job doing this? Like, it's so much fun to to sort of have this discovery come to life. And so students get to discover that, and in my lab, students do everything from helping design projects, actually carry them out, which for us means like literally taking a net, moving fish from place to place, scoring behavior videos, analyzing gene expression, measuring hormones, to the computational side, the analysis, and then the presentation of results. So really all parts of it, which I love. It's also one of my favorite parts of the job.
Yeah, a very similar experience. When I was in grad school at big R1 university, I found one of the most joy I felt in the lab was working with my undergrad research assistants. And so when I started working here, I really found that I cherished that relationship I could build with them and the ideas that they have, especially because, after 5 years of grad school and years of whatever, thinking about my own tiny little corner of the research ecosystem, I'm jaded and I'm buried in my hole and in my ivory tower and in my thinking about this is how this works, and having students with different ideas and different experiences and thoughts and histories come into my lab and express like, oh, well, if you think about it this other way, I go, oh yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. So a lot of my research in my lab, I have my specific experiments that I want to run for myself, but I am very open to collaborating with my students and coming up with ideas. So students tend to take my lab, usually after they take a class with me, most of the time on my earlier kind of cognitive neuroscience courses, sometimes even intro. I have a few who took my introductory class and was like, yep, with that. And they come in, and some of them are like, I just want to get very similar to what Tessa described. I just want to see how a lab works. I want that on my CV. I just want to, I don't know if this is really for me. And that's great. I train them how to run an EEG study. I teach them how to work with my equipment and maybe some basic programming skills. And then I have some students who come in and are like, no, I want to be your boss one day. And so how do I do that? And for those students, I go, but then I go, yeah, okay, let's do it. And with them, usually it's a couple of years of working in my lab, but we come up with an experiment. For example, right now, I'm writing a paper with 3 of my students who last year we played around with some data and we found a pretty nice but sophisticated model for predicting preclinical depression by looking at a specific frequency pattern in our brain signals of our participants. We'll be presenting this data actually in 2 weeks in Santa Barbara, and then during the summer, getting it written up and sending out for publication. Last year, so during the campus closure, I wasn't able to run my data because you need people to get EEG from. And a research assistant in my lab and I were talking about something, and I mentioned how Pitzer and neuroscience kind of go together. I mentioned that people with hair like mine tend to not get EEG signals because our hair's thick and EEG sensors can't really touch our scalp. And we started this discussion about it, which ended in her writing a pretty amazing review paper for a senior thesis that then we took and blew up into this really nice review paper that got published in a very nice journal last year. And so working with students at different levels of then, yeah, I guess, where I get the real joy in my research from. So yeah, that is one of the aspects of my job that is the best, is working with students in the lab.
Yeah, I want to echo what Darin said about a lot of academia. The training in academia can train people to become very specialized and really focus on one domain of knowledge, and that over time, over the decades, becomes increasingly restrictive and narrow. And sometimes it takes creativity to find the joy in something that you've been studying for 2 decades in an increasingly narrow way. And so one thing that I really like about environments like Pitzer and Scripps is there's more creative license in making exploration as part of your research and exploring ideas that might not work out, but there's something interesting underlying. I'll give you one example that I've been working on. It's a project that actually started about 7, 8 years ago, far before I came here, about 2 years ago. So I was really interested in studying what makes people intelligent and what motivates people to exhibit intelligence. And one domain that I found really fascinating for a long time is video games. Because you take a child and put them in a room, and often they can just be in front of this thing and do like really sophisticated and complex visual motor processing and achieving things that I can't achieve. And yet there's something intrinsically motivating them to do really well. So, like, what is that motivation? What is that internal source of drive? And how do we describe the nature of the complex behavior that the person is engaged in? So this is a kind of question that a lot of scientists retreat from because a lot of science is very reductionist. You try to isolate variables. There's something about intelligence that is about context sensitivity, thinking outside of the box, doing things in a very new way. So what I did is I designed a one-person game. It's kind of like chess, but it has much more control over it, like you want out of an experiment. And so you can turn a knob and change the complexity of the puzzles that a person experiences, and then see how they attempt to solve it. So we launched it online on the phone about 3 years ago, and got about 10,000 people mostly in Portugal and the US, where I did these studies, to play. So we have a very large data set of a bunch of people of different ages, genders, geographic backgrounds engaged in the same task. And now we're trying to understand what are the building blocks of their learning process. So one thing we've been doing is comparing human behavior to AIs, like neural networks, which also seem to be exhibiting signs of intelligence, and seeing how they approach the same problem. So when you look at people, when you look at AIs, they do a lot of trial and error. They try things, they jiggle around, and eventually they diffuse to an answer. People seem to try the same thing over and over and over again, and then when they really hit a wall, they jump. They seem to have this leap of insight that allows them to see the problem in a completely different way. And so now we're trying to figure out how to model that leap of insight. And we have a system now where we can reproduce that leap of insight across thousands of people. To give an example of a student project, a year ago, a freshman dancer approached me. She's a dance and neuroscience major. She's really interested in how movement relates to our emotional state. And she asked, how can I connect my interest in dance to your interest in neuroscience and my interest in neuroscience? So what she did is, over many discussions, we came to the idea of using Laban movement analysis, which is a framework in theater and dance that you can use to try to decompose what emotional state someone is experiencing. So many of us sit like this. I also sit like this often. And this actually implies something about the state of mind that we're in. How do you apply that to a cell phone? One thing she's trying is to look at the way in which people swipe, how long they tap the screen, while they're going through these puzzles, and trying to analyze whether their movements give us some sort of insight into their internal state during problem solving. That's just one of many examples, about 10 students of the work.
Thank you. This is a sampling of our scientists, because there are many other faculty members who have research projects that work with students too, but I hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of the classroom and research opportunities for students here at Pitzer College. So I'm going to try to sort of broaden this out a little bit from that since we've gone deep and think about that bigger context that we've all talked about working with students and the joy and that you get from that. I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about the, I think, interactions, access that students have to faculty, the relationships between students and faculty, that how you experience them, and what you would also say to a student about what they should look for, and maybe some advice about those relationships. And Tessa, can I start with you?
Okay, sounds good. One of my favorite parts of being here is working with students. I already talked about working with students in the lab, but working with students from my classes and even students from not my classes who just want to come and talk about careers, about academic choices that they're making, about just points of interest. And the fact that we are accessible and that that's a value of ours really sits well with me. That's one of the reasons that I feel like I fit in here, and I think it's one of the reasons that the students really value being here. So logistically, there are a couple places that students typically find faculty, whether it's before or after class. Faculty have student office hours, and those are hours not when the faculty member is in their office doing work, but when our offices are open to the students to come and join us for discussion, right? And again, people talk about all sorts of things. They bring me bad neuroscience headlines that they read in the news that they just want to be snarky about with me, and I totally love doing that. Everything to like, oh my god, I took this new class and now I'm thinking about something completely different for my career, like help, right? And everything in between. And then students, again, sort of going through the logistics, can also set up a time to meet with faculty just by sending them an email, or many of us use like an online calendar where students can just click a link and sign up for a time and come and find us. In terms of space, students can come to our offices. Sometimes we have bigger rooms if we're going to have a bunch of students coming for an office hours situation. I have one class where office hours are heavily attended because the students want to work together during that time, and that's great. And because we're in Southern California, you get to be outside, and so there are a lot of different outside spaces. The Keck Science courtyard is one of my favorite places to be. We have big tables and umbrellas over them, and so we can be outside most of the year. And building those connections with students is, yeah, truly one of my favorite parts of the job. And not only do I think the students benefit from our knowledge in terms of science, in terms of life, in terms of academics, all of us here have been through so much academic training, right? So we really, we remember hopefully what it was like to be at your stage, right? But also, I gained so much in terms of what students bring to that side of the conversation. There are lots of different ways also that our classes and our labs are responsive to what students want and need. There are check-ins that happen anonymously and not anonymously, right? So there are lots of different ways that students and faculty can communicate, and some of those relationships continue on. So I'm still publishing with students who have graduated. Some of those students have gone on to work with other scientific labs, including a lab that I knew that person from graduate school. So like, we get to have Pitzer students accessing the scientific networks that we also have, and those connections can stay on.
Yeah, we really covered it. One avenue where these relationships get built is actually a course that all first-year students need to take, which is the first-year seminar. And in this course, you and a group of your first-year colleagues join a faculty member, and it's, you know, it sort of looks like a writing class. It is a writing class, but really what it is a place to build community and to get to know a specific faculty member. But then all those students in those classes get paired with that faculty member for 2 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, depending on when the student decides to declare their major. So you end up getting advising and building these relationships with faculty right when you get to Pitzer. Actually, a little before campus opens. I will be teaching an FYS next year, so some of you will possibly get to know me and get to see a lot of pictures of my baby. Keeping me out. Yeah, and so this Pitzer is, we as faculty members, we are always thinking about sort of like these 4 different sections of our job, which is teaching, obviously, and research, and ways we can serve the college and the broader community. But another part, which I really, really enjoy, it's a part you don't really get training for in grad school, which is advising. And that's the place where I get to meet with students who, especially first-year students, who maybe they don't want to be a psychologist, maybe they don't want to be a neuroscientist or a data scientist or anything maybe they want to be an art major. And I can't exactly speak to all the avenues of that, but what I can do is talk about school and help them find place and help them build community and meet other faculty who I know. And that's really great. And then when students, usually in their junior year, declare their major or their minor, and they may land with me again, then I get to help them on with, research and which classes they should take as an actual, psychologist, for example. And so there's like these different ways that I get to interact and these different hats I get to wear with my students. But at the, when you really boil it down, it's about how this college really, really prioritizes the relationships built between faculty and students.
Yeah, I think for me, relationships are also really key in this whole process. I think at least the traditional classroom environment can be very transactional in terms of there being an expectation for a grade, and both people are jockeying to maximize their goals in that process. The reality is that can be really hard. I see students here up against the wall sometimes because they take a lot on. These are very ambitious students. They have many classes, they have many extracurriculars. And so I'm learning how I can use grades in a way that is motivating but not stressful. And it's a very fine line. I can't say that I'm there yet. My most rewarding and meaningful interactions with students come, I think, with time, when I get to know them as a person and they get to know me as a person. And we're in such a complex world, and the experience of finding one's role in the world is incredibly complex. And one aspect that I find really interesting is how do I balance making a living with what I believe in? And I honestly don't know what the answer for each one of you in this room is, but I like participating in that conversation because I think it's a really important conversation to have. And so I try to get to know my students and really understand what exactly it is that they want, and hopefully be a place where they can verbalize that what exactly that is. I'll give one example of a student who was a neuroscience student, a senior in my computational neuroscience class. She'd never programmed before. I gave a midterm, and many people were really anxious about it. It was really hard. I was asking them to solve problems, creative problems that they've never encountered. And she found herself staying up till the wee hours of the morning, learning how to code, and she loved it. This opened up a whole new world for her as a senior. And all of a sudden, this aligned with her realization that as a neuroscientist, she didn't want to work with animals. So here she is, senior year, has studied experimental neuroscience this whole time, and now all of a sudden realizes she wants to program in neuroscience. How do you become a computer scientist right when you're about to graduate? So we got her to apply to tons of labs that are at the interface of neuroscience, at computational and experimental neuroscience. Out of many applications, she got 3 or 4 interviews, after a few false starts, she ended up at Harvard Medical School, where she's spent 2 years now, doing programming as someone who'd never programmed before, using language models to study gene networks. So it really changed her course very quickly. Now is going to do a master's in computer science and move on to grad school in the field. So that's all to say that a lot of changes keep happening, certainly in my life, far after undergrad. And to have people to talk to in a very kind of candid and honest and way where you don't really know what the answer is, I think is a very useful activity and one that I'm very happy to engage with my students in.
Oh, everyone's had such good answers. I don't know what to add except that the way that we interact with students in our classes, in research, through advising, we get to know you guys really well. And when you want to have that conversation about what's next, or you want that letter of recommendation to help you get that next step, we know you, and we can write really strong letters of recommendation that highlight you more as a whole person and all the skills you're bringing to the table, not just, oh, they got an A in my class. That's not what our letters look like. That's not how we interact with our students here.
Thanks. So I'll make sure we have some time for questions, but there's 2 things really quickly. I mentioned the nucleus of the science building, excuse me, and the QR cards going up. I thought maybe that you all are seeing it go up day over day. You were there for the groundbreaking. If you just want to say a couple things about I think the excitement that you all have and what that will also mean for our science program.
Okay, so our new science building is scheduled to open, I guess it'll be the start of your sophomore year. If you decide to come here, it is going to be this fantastic new space. And one of the things that was really important why they were designing it, they got a lot of input from students. And students feel like if they're a tech science major, they feel like that's one of their homes on campus. But we don't have many study spaces in our current building. So one of the big things that's going to be different about this new building, in addition to like really cool, really awesome labs where you'll take classes, is there's going to be a ton of study space. Places for students to interact in small groups, in big groups. We offer a lot of free peer mentoring for all of our introductory classes. Now they're going to have their own study rooms to do that. We're hoping it's also going to facilitate, and with the switch to the two college science program, we're hoping that we'll be able to offer a lot more courses that bridge science and other disciplines as well. So we'll have the space and the time to do that too. Anything else to add?
Thanks. So I'm going to take a lightning round here. All right. So throw your curveball here. But I think just think a little bit about your role here at Pitzer, your involvement in the Pitzer community, and think about 3 words that encapsulates, I know, a challenging task, right? 3 words that you think would encapsulate kind of the Pitzer and science education and academics at Pitzer College. So the community, the science, academics. And then we'll open up to questions.
Okay, I'm going to go with inquiry, engagement, and creativity.
Great.
Go first. Get all the words.
I know. I would say curiosity, engagement, and it's not cringe, that's not and social justice, heightened there.
It's okay if you reuse other people's points of view. That's great. Thank you.
With mind, body, and soul.
I'm going to go with excitement. Can't not say curiosity. And success. Whatever that means to them.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. And I want to open things up for questions from all of you, things that you'd like to hear the faculty address up here. And Katie has a microphone, I think. Yes, Jim?
Alan, we can share
it.
Pass someone around.
does the pre-health program look like at Pitzer?
I am so glad you asked. That was the one thing I was supposed to say and hadn't yet. We have a fantastic pre-health advisor. So we have someone whose full-time job it is to work with pre-health students and help them figure out all the courses they need to take, all the volunteering experiences they need, the summer experiences they need. Her name is Susie Bang. She will be meeting with you on the first day of orientation when you're here. She's part of the process. You get connected with her right away, and she is so fantastic, and we have really high success rates of students going to medical school. And that includes all different kinds of medical programs, not just MD, but PA, public health,
More folks going into nursing as well.
nursing,
And
dentist, DO. So we support students in all of that. And several of our different science majors can include those pre-health requirement classes. So if you are thinking about pre-med, there's still options for what you can major in and get all those classes done.
And it is possible to study abroad as well, but you do need to work with your advisor just to time it. But our pre-med, our pre-health students can still study abroad if it's planned.
I have some questions. Will the pre-health advisor be staying with Pitzer and Scripps? Okay. And also, how competitive is it to get a position at your research labs?
I usually say this when I'm so bad with it. It's I guess it's kind of like a need. I am always willing to take in students who are interested and want to get some hands-on training, even if it's for a semester. I usually recommend that students take at least 2 semesters with me so they can, really get their hands dirty, or I guess in my lab covered in gel. And it's not terribly competitive in my lab. That may change when we start doing some intensive patient work, but for now, I just like having a big happy lab that I get to spend a lot of money buying pizza for. So.
There is a lot of demand for research spots. One of the best things about having an engaged student body is that folks want to get involved, and so at least at Keck, there's more student demand than there are funding spots, and faculty also apply for grants and things so that we can have more spots. Every lab has its own sort of application-like process, and at least in my lab, it is different for other labs, and I think every lab that has their processes is a good process for them. There are labs where you need to have taken a class before. In my lab, you don't need any previous experience. Everything that we do, you can learn in that lab. And sometimes it comes down to just timing. So make sure you talk to lots of different labs, and maybe it won't work for this semester, but it could for next semester. Sometimes it comes down to scheduling. If we're doing a group project, last spring I needed folks who could all meet on Wednesday afternoons, so that's what we did, and we've got a great group. And so talk to your professors, talk and hear about multiple research programs, but I don't know, a lot of the students who have interest, we eventually get into the lab. It's just not always the first time that you ask. But again, timing.
More questions?
I'll echo what Tessa said. I think I shifted from Darin's camp over to maybe what Tessa is describing. So I learned that it was hard for me to give student researchers the attention and support they needed if I had more than a certain number. And so now I went down from 11 to 5 students, which means I had to start saying no a lot more. What I found is, though, I wasn't saying no to anyone who really knew that they wanted to be there. And in the context of my work, there's a certain amount of kind of mathematical, theoretical programming training that really helps you have a very harmonious and prolific experience while doing research. So, as Tessa said, I think timing can, if you really figure out what you want and you've prepared for it, something works out among the research options.
want to leave more time for your questions, so similar to what Tessa said.
Hi, I have two questions. So first things first, do you guys keep in contact with your alumni for shadowing opportunities, like especially for pre-med students? And then also, like, what do you guys offer for students who are looking to apply to like medical school or other graduate programs that help us like stand out versus students from other schools who are applying to those same programs?
So our pre-health advisor does that. And we even have events during the year where alumni come back and talk to students who are applying, who are interested. So yeah, our pre-health coordinator makes sure all that happens, and she has the experience to really know, here are some of the things you can do to make your application stand out. We also have a process for applications where students, they get their letters of recommendation, but she organizes a committee letter to be written, so it highlights all the best parts of all the letters so that it's easier for the medical schools to see all the strengths of your application.
Yeah, and an answer that we gave a bit earlier about the relationship that is built between faculty and students, especially in the advising setting, allows us to write really good letters of rep. I mean, probably hate it for this, but I was able to write a 4-page letter for a student because I worked with the student for 3 years. I knew a lot about the student's strengths and where they wanted to go, and even things that maybe they didn't know I was noticing. I was like, wow, this is going to set them up for success. And the student got the job at Harvard and was going to be doing really, really great stuff. And I wouldn't have been able to write such a detailed, thorough letter without that level of, I guess, relationship with the students. So that's something that we do give. And I do stay in contact with many of my former advisees and some students who just took a class with me, and we just, talked a lot, throughout the rest of their academic career, and then they'll write me like, hey, I'm actually looking for a PhD program. Remember we had that discussion? Can you help me with that? And yeah, that's the best part.
Hi, thank you all for this really interesting panel. I had a question about the Tech Science Center in general and about, hearing about that, I guess, one of the schools leaving, and then wondering if that's creating any gaps. Are the professors leaving, or just how Pitzer's planning to work around that with the plan?
So Tech Science is actually staying ourselves. So we are the continuous program. And so in terms of continuity, we have the continuity, and we're extremely excited about continuing data science program that really holds up the values of Pitzer and Scripps and serves those students. And I don't know, we're just thrilled about what that is going to be. There are a couple professors that are going over, literally 2 that are going over. We've also had folks retire, we've got new hires, so we've just got an extraordinary faculty. I cannot say enough good things about my colleagues there. And honestly, in the long run, it won't be in probably your academic career here, but ultimately having that many more scientists on campus, even in the CMC program, is just going to make this a stronger scientific place. So in the coming years, we have the continuous program. It's going to be great. And in the future, we're going to have 20, 25 more. It's just going to be sort of even more of a powerhouse in that regard.
So I will say that. So as Tessa said, we are a continuous program. CMC is actually building a whole new program. So they have to hire all of the faculty, still build a building, and all that. But in the end, years from now, there will be a more computationally focused program at CMC is the current vision, more scientists, and that will complement our continuing science program. We also will grow in the next couple years.
There's some questions over here, Alan.
I recognize this is a very niche question, but I'm curious if there are any programs that cover mycology or fungi.
So we have a fantastic visiting faculty member right now, so if you decide to come here in the fall, she will be teaching some really cool classes. She teaches one called Mycology and Climate Change, which I would love to take if I was a student here. And up at the field station, they just opened, and I don't know if the groundbreaking has been yet, but they're opening a mycology lab. They have basically a space where you can grow fungi in that building, so students can do their own research projects on fungi.
The name of the professor is coming?
Oh,
We'll look it up.
we'll look at that. I don't know her last name, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah, yes, they have just started
Mia Maltz. Yes. Mia Maltz. Thank you. Yeah.
growing the samples up in the conservancy area.
Yeah.
I'm interested in like environmental science. So what does your environmental analysis program look like? And like, I'm more like into the science side of it, but also wondering about like policy and stuff like that.
Okay, so we have an EA major, so environmental analysis major, and within that you can pick different tracks. So there's a policy track, there is also a science track. So we offer a bunch of EA science classes. All EA majors have to take a set of introductory classes that involve both science and non-science aspects of environmental analysis. And then you can see what your interests are and pick from a selection of classes that can meet that. We have a lot of students. It's one of the growing majors at Pitzer. We're having some new hires in environmental analysis, both on the non-science side and on the science side.
And that's an example of a program that also spans colleges, so taking advantage of the consortium model.
In fact, do you want to say just a little bit about, since being situated in the consortium, it came up with CMC and also now this in terms of students in your classes and the connection between program here and the other colleges?
Yeah, so there are some really cool programs like environmental analysis. Neuroscience also falls into this, that we just are a multi-college network, right? And so we have neuroscientists that are centered at Tech Science, like Gautam and I, and then we have psychologists at our different colleges. We have philosophers who study the mind at these different colleges. And so not only are students able to get to know the professors here at Pitzer, but like we have professors who are in our network at the other colleges that you can also get to know, do research in their labs, and we do have students from all of the colleges. So for us, typically the 3 colleges in our classrooms, and it's really fun to have these different perspectives. People at different colleges sometimes have their different foci. Darin can answer this much better than I can.
Oh,
in terms of just like
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
So I actually went to high school in Claremont and then went away for school and then wound up back here, lucky me. And when I was younger, we'd always call the Claremont colleges the Scooby-Doo colleges because each college has its own sort of ecosystem that sort of represents different characters in Scooby-Doo. So Pitzer is Shaggy, and Agarwal is Velma, and Omoto is Scooby, and Scripps is Daphne, and CMC is Fred. And it tracks. But in all seriousness, there are these different, kind of energies in the different colleges. And so when you have, especially in my upper division courses, when I have like a spattering of everyone in there, we get these really interesting conversations and worldviews that kind of collide. And something like, the nervous system. But it's one of the great strengths of this and I guess our sister colleges.
If I could have one more question.
I recognize that you are all sort of science-based, but if you could tell me more about the mathematics programs that you have, and if there are any sort of TA opportunities within that?
I could talk a little to that because I'm part of the data science field group. We tend to get quite a few math major students who tend to also want to minor in computer science or data science. Now, Pitzer itself doesn't have a computer science major, but we do, because of the consortium, there are, things that can be moved around and courses that can be taken and things like that. The chair, the head of, I guess, I don't know who's the head, but the brilliant mind who really pushed for the data science minor to come to fruition, Professor David Bachman, is a math teacher. And I believe he has a robust lab. I believe he takes students and works with them in his lab. But there are, because of the consortium, a lot of opportunities for both applied and theoretical mathematics.
Do you know if there's math tutoring? So for our intro science class, there's a lot of opportunities to be a teaching assistant or a peer tutor. And I imagine the same is true for math, but I don't know for sure.
I would say yes, that is true. There are those opportunities. And math, we do our math field group at Pitzer, and math is also one of those that across the consortium, there's a very strong math group that meets. They do research talks and involve both students and faculty, but I think a lot like neuroscience too, it draws from all of the colleges. So not only is it situated at Pitzer, but there's also a consortium program. So, I want to make sure that you all can get to your next session, which is in Benson. And I'll say, when you walk out this building, you just go straight ahead and go across the mound, the green area. It's the next building over there. And there are some restrooms here and restrooms over there. But otherwise, I want to thank you today. I want to thank Darin,